Chapter 14. An hour and a half later, most of the players were no longer seriously interested in their own play. The whole interest of the game centered on Rostov. Instead of 1,600 rubles, he had a long column of figures scored against him, which he had reckoned up to 10,000, but which he now supposed must have risen to 15,000. In reality, it already exceeded 20,000 rubles. Dolokhov was no longer listening to stories or telling them. He followed every movement of Rostov's hands and occasionally ran his eyes over the score against him. He had decided to play until the score reached 43,000. He had fixed on this figure because 43 was the sum of his and Sonia's ages. Rostov, supporting his head on both hands, sat at the table, which was scrolled over with figures, wet with wine, and littered with cards. One harrowing sensation never left him: that those big boned, reddish hands, with hairs visible under their shirt cuffs, those hands that he loved and hated, held him in their power. 600 rubles, ace, quarter, stake, 9. Impossible to win it back. And how pleasant it was at home. The knave, double, or quits. It can't be. But why is he doing this to me, Rostov wondered. Sometimes he put a large stake on a card, but Dolokhov refused it and fixed the stake himself. Nikolai yielded to him, and at one moment prayed to God as he had prayed when under fire on the bridge over the Inns. At the next, he imagined that the first card that came to hand from the heap of bent cards under the table would save him. Now counted the cards on his jacket and took a card with that number and tried staking the total of his losses on it. Now looked around for help from other players. Now peered into Dolokhov's cold face and tried to read what was passing in his mind. He knows what this loss means to me, he said to himself. Surely he can't want to ruin me. Why, he was my friend, and I loved him. But it's not his fault. What can he do if he has such luck? And it's not my fault either, he thought to himself. I have done nothing wrong. Have I killed anyone, insulted, or wished anyone harm? Such a little while ago I came to this table with the idea of winning 100 rubles to buy that little casket for Mama's name day, and then going home. I was so happy, so free, so light-hearted. And I did not realize then how happy I was. When did that end? When did this new, awful state of things begin? What marked the change? Have I been sitting all this time in this same place at this same table, picking cards, putting them down, and looking at those deaf, big bone hands? When did it happen, and what has happened? Am I well and strong, and just the same as I was, and still in the same place? No, it can't be. Surely it will all end in nothing. He was flushed and bathed in perspiration, though the room was not hot, and his face was terrible and pitiful, and the more so because of his futile efforts to seem calm. The score against him had reached the fateful figure of 43,000. Rostov had just prepared a card by bending the corner on which he meant to double the 3,000 just put down to his score, when Dolokhov, slapping the pack of cards down on the table, pushed it aside and commenced rapidly adding up the figures of Rostov's deck, breaking the chalk as he put down the total in his clear, firm hand. Supper time for supper, and here are the gypsies. A group of swarthy men and women were in fact coming in from the cold outside, saying something in their gypsy accent. Nikolai realized that it was all over, but he said in an indifferent tone, "What, won't you go on? I had such a nice little card already." He spoke as if was interested. What interested him most was the fun of the game. It's all over. I'm done for, he thought. Now a bullet through my head. That's all that's left for me. But even as he was thinking this, he said in a cheerful tone, "Come, just one more card." "All right," replied Dolokhov, having finished the addition. "All right." Make it 21 roubles, he said, pointing to the figure of 21, by which the total exceeded the round figure of 43,000. And he took up the pack and prepared to deal. Rostov submissively unbent the corner of his card, and instead of the 6,000 he had intended, carefully wrote 21. It's all the same to me, he said. I only wanted to see whether you would win this 10 or let me have it. Dolokhov gravely began to deal. Oh, how Rostov loathed at that moment those reddish hands with their short fingers and hairy wrists, which he held them in their power. The 10 fell to him. You owe me 43,000, Count, said Dolokhov, getting up from the table and stretching himself. One certainly gets tired sitting so long. Yes, I am a little tired too, said Rostov. Dolokhov cut him short as if reminding him that it was not for him to jest. When am I to receive the money, Count? Rostov flushed and drew Dolokhov into the next room. I can't pay it all immediately. Will you take an IOU? He asked. Well, Rostov, said Dolokhov, smiling brightly and looking Nikolai straight into the eye, you know the saying, lucky in love, unlucky at cards. Your cousin is in love with you, I know. Oh, it's awful to feel myself so in this man's power, thought Rostov. He knew what a blow he would inflict on his father and mother when he told them of his loss. He felt what happiness it would be to be free of all this, and he felt that Dolokhov knew that he could rid him of this shame and anguish, but now wanted to play with him, as a cat plays with a mouse. Your cousin, Dolokhov started to say, but Nikolai cut him short. My cousin has nothing to do with this, and there is no need to mention her, he cried wrathfully. Then, when am I to have it? Demanded Dolokhov. Tomorrow, said Rostov, and left the room. Chapter 15. To say tomorrow and maintain a dignified tone was not difficult, but to go home alone, to see his sisters, brother, mother, and father, to confess and ask for money he had no right to after giving his word of honor, was terrible. At home, they had not yet gone to bed. The young people, after coming home from the theater, had had supper and were grouped around the clavichord. As soon as Nikolai entered the ballroom, he was enveloped in that poetic atmosphere of love that prevailed in the house that winter, and now, after Dolokhov's proposal and Voljo's ball, seemed to have grown heavier around Sonia and Natasha, like the air before a thunderstorm. Sonia and Natasha, looking pretty and conscious of it, in the light blue dresses they had worn to the theater, were standing by the clavichord, happy and smiling. Vera was playing chess with Shinshin in the drawing room. The old countess, waiting for her son and her husband to come home, was playing patience with an old gentlewoman who lived in their house. Denisov, with sparkling eyes and ruffled hair, sat at the clavichord, one leg flung out behind him, striking chords with his short fingers, and rolling his eyes as he sang in a small, husky but true voice, a poem of his own composition called The Enchantress, to which he was trying to fit music. Oh, tell me, enchantress, with what powers is this, drawing me to my forsaken lair, my fingers smoking the strings in bliss, setting my heart on fire? He sang in passionate tones, his black, agitated eyes flashing at the frightened but delighted Natasha. Beautiful, wonderful, cried Natasha. Another verse, she said, not noticing Nikolai. Everything's still the same with them, thought Nikolai, glancing into the drawing room, where he saw Vera and his mother and the old lady. Ah, here's Nikolenka, exclaimed Natasha, running to him. Is Papa home? He asked. So glad you come, cried Natasha, not answering his question. We're having such fun. Vasily Dmitritch is staying on another day for my sake. Did you know? No, Papa's not back yet, said Sonia. Coco, are you back? Come here, darling, called the old countess from the drawing room. Nikolai went to his mother, kissed her hand, and without saying a word, sat down at her table and watched her hands as she laid out the cards. From the ballroom came the sound of laughter and merry voices trying to persuade Natasha to sing. All right, cried Denisov. It's no good making excuses now. It's your turn to sing the Bassa Wall. I entreat you, the countess glanced at her silent son. What is the matter? She asked. Oh, nothing, he replied, as though sick of being continued to ask the same question. Will Papa be home soon? I expect so. Everything's the same with them. They don't know. What am I to do with myself, thought Nikolai, and he got up and went back to the ballroom. Sonya was sitting at the clavichord, playing the prelude to Denisov's favorite barcarolle. Natasha was preparing to sing, and Denisov watched her with enraptured eyes. Nikolai commenced pacing up and down the room. Why do they want to make her sing? How can she sing? There's nothing to be so happy about, he thought. Sonya struck the first chord of the prelude. My God, I'm ruined, a dishonored man, a bullet through my head. That's all that's left for me. Not singing, he thought. Go away, but where to? I don't care. Let them sing. He continued to pace the room, looking gloomily at Denisov and the girls, but avoiding their eyes. Nikolenka, what is the matter? Sonia's eyes asked, as she looked intently at him. She had seen at once that something had happened to him. Nikolai turned away from her. Natasha, too, with her sensitivity, had instantly noticed her brother's state. But although she had noticed it, she was herself in such high spirits at that moment, so far from sorrow, melancholy, or self-reproach, that she purposely deceived herself, as young people often do. No, I'm too happy just now to spoil my enjoyment by sympathizing with anyone's misery, she felt, and said to herself, oh, I'm probably mistaken. He must be happy, just as I am. Now, Sonia, she said, going to the very middle of the room, where she considered the Renaissance was best. Lifting her head and letting her arms hang lifelessly, as ballet dancers do, Natasha moved to the middle of the room with a springy step and stood still. Yes, that's me, she seemed to say in response to the rapt gaze with which Denisov followed her. And what is she so pleased about, thought Nikolai, looking at his sister. How is it she isn't feeling irked and ashamed? Natasha took the first note. Her throat swelled, her chest rose, and her eyes took on a serious expression. At that moment, she was oblivious of everyone and everything, and from her smiling lips flowed sounds that anyone may produce at the same intervals and hold for the same length of time, but leave you cold 1,000 times, and 1,000 first thrill you and make you weep. That winter, for the first time, Natasha had begun to take her singing seriously, mainly because Denisov was so enthusiastic over her voice. She no longer sang like a child. There was no longer that droll, childish, painstaking effect that had been apparent before. She did not sing well, as the connoisseurs who heard her said. It's not a trained voice, they all said, but it's a beautiful voice, and must be trained. This was generally said, however, some time after she had finished singing. While they were listening to that untrained voice with its incorrect breathing and labored transitions, even the connoisseurs said nothing, and only delighted in it, and wished to hear it again. Her voice had a virginal purity, an unconsciousness of its own power, an uncultivated yet velvety quality that was so much a part of her lack of artistry in singing that it seemed as if nothing in that voice could be changed without spoiling it. What is this? Nikolai wondered, listening to her wide-eyed. What has happened to her? How is she singing tonight? And suddenly the whole world for him centered in anticipation of the next note, the next phrase. Everything in the world was divided into three beats. O mio cridio afflecto. 1, 2, 3. 1. Oi mio crio affecto. 1, 2, 3. 1. Oh, this senseless life of ours, thought Nikolai. All that misery, and money, and Dolokhov, and malice, and honor. It's all nothing. But this is real. Now, Natasha, now, my darling, now, my girl, how will she take that sea? She's done it. Oh God. And without being aware that he was singing to support her sea, he had sung, a third below the high note. Oh God, how lovely. Did I really take it? How glorious, he thought. And how that chord had vibrated, how something that was best in Rostov's soul had been moved, and this something was apart from everything else in the world. and above everything in the world. What were gambling losses, Dolokhov, and words of honor? All nonsense. One might murder, rob, and yet be happy. Chapter 16. It was a long time since Rostov had derived such pleasure from music as he had that evening, but as soon as Natasha finished her barcarolle, reality again presented itself. Leaving the room without a word, he went downstairs to his own room. A quarter of an hour later, the old count returned from his club, cheerful and contented. Hearing him drive up, Nikolai went to him. "Will you have a good time?" asked Ilya Androvitch, smiling happily and proudly at his son. Nikolai tried to say yes, but could not, and nearly broke into sobs. The count was lighting his pipe and did not notice his son's state. "Well, it's unavoidable," thought Nikolai for the first and last time, and suddenly, in the most casual tone, which seemed obnoxious even to himself, he said to his father, as merely asking for the carriage to drive into town, "Papa, I've come to you on a matter of business. I was almost forgetting. I need some money." "Is that so?" said his father, and was in a particularly good humor. "I told you it wouldn't be enough. Did you need much?" "Very much," said Nikolai, flushing, and with a stupid, nonchalant smile, for which he was long unable to forgive himself. "I have lost a little at cards, that is, a great deal, a very great deal, actually. 43,000. "What? To whom?" "You're joking," shouted the old count, flushing apoplectically, as old people do, and turning red to the nape of his neck. "I promised to pay tomorrow," said Nikolai. "Well," said the old count, throwing up his hands and sinking helplessly onto the sofa, "it can't be helped. It happens to everyone," said his son in a bold, offhand tone, while in his heart he considered himself a worthless scoundrel whose whole life could not atone for his crime. He longed to kiss his father's hand, to go down on his knee and beg his forgiveness, instead of which he was telling him in a casual and even rude tone that it happened to everyone. Count Ilya Androvitch lowered his eyes when he heard his son's words, and hurriedly commenced looking for something. Yes, yes," he mumbled, "it will be difficult, I fear, difficult to raise. Happens to everyone. Yes, happens to everyone." And with a fleeting glance at his son's face, the count went out of the room. Nikolai had prepared for opposition, but had not expected this. "Papa? Papa," he called after him, sobbing, "forgive me." And seizing his father's hand, he pressed it to his lips and burst into tears. While the father and son were having this conversation, the mother and daughter were having one no less important. Natasha came running to her mother in great excitement. "Mama! Mama! He has made—" "Made what?" "Made me a proposal, Mama. Mama!" she exclaimed. The countess could not believe her ears. Denisov had proposed, and to whom? To this chit of a girl, Natasha, who not long ago was playing with dolls and was still in the schoolroom. "Natasha, stop this nonsense," she said, still hoping it was a joke. "Nonsense, indeed. I'm telling you a fact," said Natasha indignantly. "I came to ask you what to do, and you call it nonsense." The countess shrugged her shoulders. "If it is true that Monsieur Denisov has proposed to you, then tell him he's a fool. That's all." "No, he's not a fool," said Natasha, seriously and resentfully. "Well then, what do you want? You're all in love nowadays, it seems." "Well, if you're in love, marry him," said the countess with a laugh of annoyance, "and God bless you." "No, Mamma, I'm not in love with him." "I suppose I'm not in love with him. Well, then tell him so." "Mamma, are you cross? Don't be cross, darling. It's not my fault, is it?" "No, but what is it you want, my dear? Would you like me to go and tell him?" asked the countess, smiling. "No, I'll do it myself. Only tell me what to say. It seems all very easy to you," she added, responding to her mother's smile. "But if you had seen how he said it, you know, I'm sure he didn't mean to say it, but it just slipped out by accident." "Well, all the same, you must refuse him." "No, I mustn't. I'm so sorry for him. He's so nice." "Then accept his proposal." It's high time you were married, said the Countess crossly and sarcastically. No, Mamma, but I feel so sorry for him. I don't know how to tell him. There's no need for you to say anything. I'll speak to him myself, said the Countess, indignant that anyone should have dared to treat her little Natasha as if she were a grown up. No, on no account. I'll tell him myself, and you listen at the door. And Natasha ran across the drawing room and into the ballroom, when Denisov was still sitting on the same chair by the clavichord, his face in his hand. He jumped up at the sound of her light footstep. Natalie, he said, moving rapidly toward her, decide my fate. Is it in your hands? It is in your hands. Vasily Dmitri, I'm so sorry for you, but no, but you're so nice. But it can't be. It, but I shall always love you as a friend. Denisov bent over her hand, and she heard strange, incomprehensible sounds. She kissed his rough, curly black head. At that moment, they heard the quick rustle of the Countess's dress. She came up to them. Vasily Dmitri, I thank you for the honor you do us, she said in an embarrassed voice, which to Denisov sounded severe. But my daughter is so young, and I should have thought that as my son's friend you would have addressed yourself to me first. In that case, you would have not obliged me to give this refusal. Countess, began Denisov with downcast eyes and guilty face. He tried to say something more, but faltered. Natasha could not see him in such a plight and remain calm. She began to sob loudly. Countess, I have done wrong, Denisov went on in his unsteady voice. But believe me, I so adore your daughter and all your family that I would give my life twice over. He looked at the Countess, and seeing her stern face, said, Well, goodbye, Countess, and kissing her hand, left the room with swift, resolute strides without looking at Natasha. The following day, Rostov saw Denisov off, as he did not wish to remain another day in Moscow. All his Moscow friends gave him a farewell party at the Gypsies, and he had no recollection of how they got him into the sledge, or of the first 3 stages of his journey. After Denisov's departure, Rostov spent another 2 weeks in Moscow waiting for the money, which the old count was unable to raise all at once. He did not go out of the house and spent most of his time in the girl's room. Sonia was more tender and devoted than ever. It was as if she wanted to show him that losing at cards was a feat for which she loved him all the more. But Nikolaev now considered himself unworthy of her. He filled the girl's albums with verses and musics, and when at last he sent Dolokhov the 43,000 rubles and received the receipt, he left at the end of November without taking leave of any of his acquaintances to rejoin his regiment, which was already in Poland. Thank you for watching. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Leave a comment below. Subscribe if you like, or just keep watching. And I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.